Thanks for joining us. Today's focus is Tesla option secrets that you should be aware of. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. One of the focus of our show has been sort of tips and secrets to better investing. So what I wanted to do today is sort of open up with the screen you see in front of you of, if you type into your Google bar, Tesla Yahoo Finance, and then you'll get the screen that you see here currently. I'm even going to obstruct myself temporarily with it so you can better see it. So what's actually happening here is I believe Yahoo has an excellent finance page, and I found it to be a quick way to get information necessary to get a feel for what's going on with stocks and options. And particularly in this case, I'm going to walk you through getting a feel for the PIN process that we're headed into this Friday. So the first thing I do is I look at this page. You'll notice that there's a bar there that lists a whole bunch of things that you can draw up. And one of those items is actually, it says options. So what I'm going to do right now is stand up and toggle options. So now what we're looking at is the options page on Tesla. You'll notice that what they typically do is they start at the top of the page with what are called call options, and if you keep scrolling down, you'll get a hold of what's called put options. So I know this is very simple, but a whole bunch of people have asked me about this, and so I want you to be able to understand what I'm talking about when we talk about the market makers creating pins that you should be aware of and understand how it works. So if we're now looking at this page, what we can do is scroll down right now. I just checked it, and there are sort of two numbers that I generally look at. Number one, what is the number of options at 700, 750, and 800? i.e. the number of open interests and how many of them are trading. So those are sort of usually the big numbers on the options. The other thing you'll notice is that there'll be other option numbers that you'll see throughout. So I'm going to close the laptop right now and sort of go through my presentation on what you just saw. So one of the main ratios that a lot of folks, including myself, look at is something that we call the put-call ratio. So what that means is that if you look at the list that you have there, you'll notice that we have something called puts and we have something called calls. What generally happens is that if the number of puts and the number of calls are kind of about the same number, market makers are happy. They're not trying to move the markets around a great deal. Right now, if we go through that list and look at what's called the 800 calls that expire this week, what you'll notice is that there are 26,000 calls at that point. I did not check the number of puts before I made this comment, but the number is going to be somewhere around 8 to 10,000. So what this means is that if you have 26,000 calls and 10,000 puts, there's almost 3 times as many calls as puts. So what happened to me, and this is 20 years ago, over the last 10 or 15, it's about 20 years ago, starting when I was doing a lot of trading, one of the things I noticed was that every time that you had this ratio being that big, like a 3 to 1, the market makers seemed to do something that I call pinning. And what they would do is they would figure out a way to lower the stock price so that all those 26,000 calls would end up being worthless. So I, I I didn't even call it the put ratio to call ratio. I call it the screw you phenomenon, where it felt to me like the market makers were trying to make sure the maximum number of people lost a whole bunch of money. So, hence, I can't call it the screw you ratio, so I call it the pin ratio. The general point, though, is that take a look at all the options on the list that I showed you. And what you'll notice is that the biggest numbers, meaning the biggest number of calls, tend to be either at the 00, call it 800, at the 50, call it 750, or at the 700. So if we look at things like the 700, 800, 900 call options, whether it's expiring this week or next week or the week after, there's this trend you'll notice where most of the options that have been sold are at those major strike prices. We also have a phenomenon where at the half mark, i.e. 750, 850, 950, we also tend to have a large number of both puts and calls at those numbers. So when I'm discussing pin action that we're seeing for this Friday, what I'm after or talking about is the fact that if I say the market makers want to pin the stock below 800, what that means is that if I ask you to go and look, you'll see that there are 26,000 calls at the 800 mark. Yesterday, 56,000 of them traded. And so what this then suggests, and it's useful to sort of look through this number because, for example, last week as we reviewed, there were 43,000 puts at the 800 mark, and there are as many as 126,000 trading on a daily basis. So there are many tools that you can use to get a feel for where's the market, what are the market makers trying to do with the stock. There are all these little pieces of information that you're gathering in your investing and trading process, and one of them that I think is critical is the put-call ratio, particularly as we get to expiration of options at the end of the day. So in this case, what I wanted to review further is the fact that, hey, it's a Wednesday. Do we usually see that put-call ratio heavily influencing things today? It's possible it could even start first thing of the week. But usually what we start noticing is between Wednesday and Thursday, there's a transition that starts to happen where the market makers will make a very strong effort to make sure that the stock prices move in the direction that's favorable to them. Now, the other thing I wanted to make a note of is that there are market makers and there are very smart former Wall Streeters who are now trading on their own. There is something called selling calls and selling puts. And individuals like yourself can choose to sell covered calls or sell naked calls, or there are all these instruments you could use. When we're looking at these call options, usually there's some individuals selling covered calls, meaning they own the shares and they're selling you the right to buy the shares at a certain price. When you sell that covered call, if it doesn't cross 800, for example, I think for this week, as we look at the numbers we just saw, an excellent thing to do right now is if you have a bunch of Tesla shares, I would sell covered calls on Tesla. What that means is there's somebody that thinks the stock prices are going to cross 800 and they're willing to pay you money for the right or access to Tesla shares, mindful of the fact that their goal is for it to cross 800. Now, from my knowledge of Tesla, what we've been seeing, the news that's available, I think there's about a 2% chance that the stock crosses over 800 and above. If you're selling a covered call, you get a premium or you get a check immediately for selling that covered call. And if it doesn't cross 800 by Friday, you keep your shares and you keep the money that you got out of it. And so I've been watching people with a decent sized portfolio make $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 a week selling these covered calls successfully. And it's entirely possible that you may be one of those people, and congratulations, because you have the resources to do so, and you're getting a way better return on your money than messing with leaving your money in the bank for less than 1% return. So, the thing about this is that it's one thing for people to sell the covered calls. It's another thing for them to move the stock in a way to control what happens at that price point. And that's the argument we're making, is that there's a trend that if they're about the same number of calls and puts, stocks don't tend to move in any particular direction. What we've noticed is that if I have a theory I call it the maximum screw. So let's say there's a whole bunch of people that have a lot of puts. They're double or triple the number of puts than calls. What we've noticed is the stock tends to go up. And that's because there's a bunch of people, we think market makers, who've sold a large number of puts. And now they have to make sure that those puts end up worthless. And the way to do that is push stock price up. I'm going to stay out of that and just stick with calls because we have a whole bunch of them, 800 right now as a target. The general point is the market makers know that there's a huge number of covered calls that they've sold, and they want to make sure the stock stays below 800 so they can make money off of that. Same thing at the 750 level. Now, this week the stock is around 710, between 710 and 720 currently. In my mind, what this means is if you look on that option string, look at the 700 call expiring this Friday. What you'll notice is that we have a situation where the market makers not only want 800s to expire, worthless 750s to expire, but if it becomes Thursday or Friday and we're within 5 points of $700 a share, it's a high likelihood that they will somehow figure out a way to pull the stock from 700 down towards 695 or even lower. Now, why are they doing this? Because there's a whole bunch of people that have calls at 700. And if they can lower the price below 700, all those call options end up being worthless and they make money on the options that they've sold. So I think you're sort of getting the idea of how this theory works. Now, if you're a serious investor, a serious trader, I think you should be charting this. So every week that comes up, starting on Monday, you should have a list of all the major strike prices of Tesla for that week and how many calls and how many puts there are. You should also consider charting on a daily basis what that ratio is. Is the ratio changing to more calls being sold or more puts being bought? How is that ratio trading? Not a bad idea to glance at the number that are being traded as well. It shows you the amount of action that's going on at that position. So I wanted to bring all this up to you because, yes, things like, hey, how good are Tesla's earnings? Hey, has Elon made an announcement that could be good or bad for the company? There are a lot of variables that can drive the stock price. Another one that can drive the stock price is that put-call ratio. Now, perhaps to finish up, and I'm really going to use the guide of what you guys asked questions was to say more or less on this whole issue. Kind of one of my mentors in investing is a gentleman named Mr. Metz from Oppenheimer. I believe he's passed away now, but one of the things he pointed out is that every day he looks at the tape. He watches a review of the tape of the NYSE as he's driving home in his limo. And what he shared was that if he watches the tape, he can actually see insider trading, meaning there are certain people who have information ahead of other people and they're trading it. And he's gotten so good at reading the tape that he can tell when there's insider trading going on, and he can do the trades without doing insider trading himself. He can actually feel the trade or see it, execute a trade of his own to take advantage of the opportunity that's there before a lot of other people kind of understand what's going on. This moves me into a realm that I kind of didn't want to cover, but it's an issue that's come up, and I have been reluctant to go into it, but there's a concept that I call sniffing. And so a question for you would be, what happened to all the large numbers of people that were doing day trading? Well, the answer was that they were being trained by a lot of big companies in terms of what happens. Then what happened was that there are these very large computer systems, mostly owned by the market maker giant firms. And what they could actually do is watch how people were trading. What are they holding? Are they holding this, calls or puts? Bottom line is, they can see your trading positions and automatically counter the trade methods that you're making money on. So one of the problems the day traders found was these guys were using bots or computers to sniff out the trades that were profitable for their customers and then completely wipe them out by using countermeasures against that successful trading. So one of my trading methods, and I think it's worth tracking going forward, is, does Tesla's stock price get pinned on a Friday? What we've noticed is in about 80% of the cases, the low point for Tesla's stock price for the week is the last hour or two of Friday and starts to trail up towards the end of Friday. Then Monday and Tuesday tends to be profitable or upward trajectory. Now, what will happen now, because we have earnings on Monday, in theory, if the stock price hits well, in terms of all the numbers that go with the volume of sales we saw, Tesla's stock price should skyrocket up. The issue, though, that comes up is that it is a Monday or Tuesday, so we'll be up. But let's get a week or two out of this, and Tesla tends to get into a pattern where the stock price is pinned on Fridays, and then the pin is released on Mondays, and Mondays and Tuesdays tend to be positive before we go back into this roller coaster ride back down again. So we shall see if and how this all works out. I wanted you to understand in general what we were doing. The other thing to note is the more profitable this becomes, obviously you have folks that are sniffing out that trade, and you could see changes occur. But one could argue that in between 70 and 80% of the cases over the last year's worth of Fridays, especially if you deduct an earnings call or something, this has been pretty much what's gone on. And as you see these patterns and understand them, you can start doing things like, well, if you want to buy shares, you kind of know it's going to be on a Friday afternoon, it's going to be at best prices. If you want to sell them, it's going to tend to be at the apex on a Monday or Tuesday, and you can make a lot more money than you would have otherwise. So it's actually worth tracking these data points. I've seen some questions fired across about, well, Greg, what time on Friday does it occur? And I could tell you it happens at 2:01 and 22 seconds. But the issue is there's a feel factor to it where, it does change, and it just tends to be in these periods. One other data point I wanted to throw in, if you're buying or selling, is to note the difference in prices in the first hour and a half and the last hour and a half of the day. The way the large institutions tend to operate is that they like to buy shares when everybody else is doing a lot of trading. So you'll notice about 65% of the shares are traded in the first or last hour and a half of the day. So you might want to be mindful of that, particularly if you're moving a lot of shares, because your sale or purchase of shares can actually cause the stock to go up or down slightly, hurting the value that you get when you sell or buy. So this is another sort of trading tip you might want to consider. Reminder, don't forget to like and subscribe. We also want to encourage you to join us on Patreon. We do sort of a daily update on investing and trading on Tesla, and I think you'll find the information valuable. We also have some videos on trading options, and we do options and stock consulting if you want some direct. You can hit us up on Facebook under Tesla Fan Insight, a private message with just an email so we can send you a note, or a phone number so we can respond. We'll, again, have more on this. As you have questions, we'll work to answer them and give input that would be useful. I also wanted to point out that we give general information here on Tesla and what's happening with options and why and stocks. The challenge is nobody has it absolutely perfect, especially there's some of you with large portfolios that are like, oh, I'll just watch these 3 channels and I'll trade on what they're saying. Hey, it's better for you to use it as a general knowledge piece than to absolutely go do it. And you want to back test what people are talking about, including me, to see if it works. So no, don't trade heavy large on stuff if you haven't talked with the person directly, because you have a lot of money at risk and not pay. It's really dumb to go out, not pay for information, and then get burned on a trade versus having more information to guide what you're doing, mindful of all the potential issues that could happen for that trade. So again, we look forward to your comments. We do have some SpaceX shares if there's interest there. So let's move on to our health tips of the day. Also, we wanted to remind you, elderberry with zinc, the liquid form, not the chewables, is highly recommended by numerous doctors that we know is a part to build up your immune system. Vitamin D, vitamin C, also highly recommended in this zone, whether you have the shots or not. Also wanted to mention flexibility. I'm doing a lot of core training, which includes flexibility to help with some back pain issues. Also wanted to encourage you, if you're particularly above 6 feet, to consider exercise on a bike or some other method that doesn't require heavy running on hard surfaces as a way to preserve your back, but at the same time be able to stay in shape. Any rate, we also have our list of usuals. Don't forget your 25 leg lifts a day to improve quad strength, to reduce potential knee issues. Also wanted to encourage you to not go to bed within 4 hours of eating, minimum 2, allowing the food to digest. Also wanted to encourage you to consider a 5-2 or other fasting diet. We actually had someone mention on our show that he asked about whether or not we're looking at mental health methods. And we're open to ideas, not just a suggestion. One suggestion that was made, as you can hear the trees around me, is that the more time you spend in nature, the better. Because what starts to happen is your body relaxes. There's a whole bunch of sort of health benefits to walking or hiking in nature relative to de-stressing and mental health. I've actually taught some meditation classes over the years and open to doing a quick meditation session during the show if there's interest as a possibility. At any rate, I wanted to thank you for taking time out to join us. Look forward to your comments and questions on this. This is great for Testafan Insight. Tschüss German, au revoir French, Lahitro Hebrew, Choda Hafez, Farsi, Strazviche Russian, Ni hao ma Chinese, Konbanwa Japanese, G'day our friends in Australia, Strazviche Russian, Hey Do our friends in Sweden, and in Jamaica we say enough respect, walk good. Thanks once again for joining us and have a great day, and bye for now.